Claude has presumably read every last book on software engineering and code development out there. Why do I have to do this harness? Clearly something is going wrong.
I've never met anyone like it.
He could hack anybody's phone in a matter of minutes. Who is that guy? Who can do that?
Thomas is the most interesting man in the world.
He's one of my favorite people on the planet. Inventor.
Wicked smart.
The master of cutting corners.
If you had a dead body in your trunk, who would you call?
He would get arrested immediately in a lineup.
I stood in line to get his autograph.
You know, his mouth can barely keep up to his brain.
I don't actually know what Pablos does.
A hacker magician.
Man of the future. Future.
And one of the ones that he thinks looks most promising does harnesses. And he was saying, like, in your neck of the woods, meaning academic research, is harness the big thing right now. And I'm like, I don't know if I would agree with that, but let's continue for the moment, right? So it is true that harnesses are a hot topic, right? Yeah. At least among a segment of AI world, AI research world even, but, not the only one, but what, right? Mm-hmm. Because we have these LLMs, and then now there's other things on top of the LLMs, right? But we just call them models, right? And you can't quite get them to do what you want most of the time. Mm-hmm. And so all this harness industry, which it almost is at this point, is basically trying to channel that river into the banks you want it to be in, right? Which, if it was truly smart, you would need to do, yes. Right? And moreover, and I mean, I've heard folks that I think Anpik and some others talk about this. Don't go, this remember was the thing. Yeah. And, I tweeted I forget the exact words, but gonna last long, right? Because now I went to the harness engineering. But the smarter researchers and companies know that harness is a temporary thing. Mm-hmm. If your horizon is the next few years, and it may be, right? You just need this stuff now, then by all means, do the harness. But don't put effort into it thinking it's going to pay off long term. It's a temporary measure. In the medium long term, we'll have better AI. And again, I think the Anthropic folks say, or some of them, that we try to be as lightweight in our harnesses as possible because they are really true believers that they're on the straight shot to AGI. Mm. And if you think about it through those eyes, this harness stuff, we're not going to need it at some point. Now, where those improvements are going to come from is another question. But harness is really a lot of... It's funny because what we've seen in the last 3-4 years is AI does these amazing things, yeah. But then what you see on top of it is the same old hacking that the next step of AI is going to make irrelevant. Yeah. And harnesses are just the latest incarnation of that.
What made Anthropic the real contender it is was the coding harness. And you're right, it may be a moment in time, and they may throw it out at some point where it's like, we don't even need any more because the AI is so good. But the opportunities in this window of time, which might just be a few years, might be the venture window that they're investing on, is a land grab. I could switch from Claude to Codex to Grok or any other piece of crap any day, and I don't really care. They're all amazing. And so I get that if you've memorized command key combinations or built macros to do shit, whatever, and it fits into your old IDE, then you're stuck. But by and large, I think you're right. I'm not going to care. And by extension, it probably means that's going to be true for legal, for medical, for any other application.
Important distinction to be made here. Yeah. Which a lot of the future of these companies depends on, I think. A harness, if we take that angle, but this is larger than that, there's really two aspects to a harness. Okay. One is, I got to teach this thing to do proper or good software engineering. Right. That's the part that I think should die one of these days because Claude has presumably read every last book on software engineering and code development out there. Why do I have to do this harness? Clearly something is going wrong there, right? So teaching you to be a good software engineer, and it can do a ton of things, right? But that shouldn't take a harness. So that part I think is short-lived. But there's another part that you kind of alluded to there, which is in the long run much more important, at least for the point of view of value creation and value capture, which is a lot of the harness is me telling the system to act the way I like. That's right. I want you to be this kind of code developer. I want you to work with me in the following way. I have these things that I like, good or bad, then you need to work. There, I don't think there's much capture, much moat. In the latter, there's a lot, right? If I'm not able to easily port that, and there are reasons why, there are good and bad reasons, but there are, I think, potentially, I actually think we could see a world in which the the moat and the switching costs and the capture of AI is the biggest you've ever seen.
Really?
By how locked in you are and by how much value for the company there is in that lock-in. The only problem is that like Anthropic and OpenAI and those, they have none of it right now. As you said,
Yeah.
does any... You see a little bit of that in Cloud Code because people kind of like the way it works in a number of ways, and that's a big part of it, right? Yeah. But like, if tomorrow, right, something comes along that actually lets me do even more coding, even less trouble, goodbye Cloud Code.
Yeah, it's kind of wild because I basically don't want to use any software anymore unless I have the code. There was a time when I had like an idealistic version of that and was running BSD and shit, but now it's that I just want to be able to add features, change things by telling my AI to do it, right. And which I'm doing all day long now. I'm just go add a button for this, change the way that works. And I couldn't do that to the apps that I had before. I still can't add a button to Photoshop. And so I'm like, I don't really need Photoshop. I don't use 90% of those buttons. Just rebuild the parts that I do, and I'll use my own version. And that's kind of where I think it goes. And maybe you end up in a world where, like even in an enterprise context, maybe you still have some Salesforce-esque database behind everything, but every user has their own, almost like own interface.
Exactly right. And the thing is, this is where there's a lot of the, capture and the value, if you will, which is once I have spent several years with the tool, and again, continual learning, as it's called these days, but psychologists and in the early days of machine learning, we call it incremental learning, right? Or online learning is what the theorists call it, right? But the idea is like, your system should be learning all the time.
Right.
What is this thing of like, I understand why it happens, but think about it from the point of view things should be, right, in the future.
Okay.
Why did this thing stop learning when it left the factory, right? Once I have spent years with the system, indirectly training it, and sometimes explicitly, but also very much indirectly, to do things as I want.
Yes.
It's become an extension of me. The threshold for me getting rid of it is going to be impossibly high for a company that is starting from scratch.
Unless they can distill it out of you. The new company should be able to observe and distill out of you.
No, but it's starting. There's always this cold start problem, right? Which is really, I see LLMs and the whole internet as just solving the cold start problem.
Okay.
Right. It's the biggest solving the cold start problem yet, right? Okay. But now to give the other side of this, right? Because AI is interesting because like it always has these multiple sides. You were talking about Salesforce and things like them, right? Like the SaaS companies, and is it the SaaS apocalypse coming and whatnot? On the one hand, yes, because right, why a lot of all of these companies, including Microsoft and IBM and the 50-year-old systems and the COBOL stuff, is that like it's perverse, but it's like it's the crap that's the moat.
Yeah.
If it wasn't so crappy, like the problem is that like I mean I've seen this, for example, at my university. I was like, they try to update their system that does whatever, and it's their financials or their what HR, and it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Right. But here's the thing: the good news is AI dissolves a lot of that moat because the AI can understand.
Yeah. Right.
Like all that little crap, the AI can go in and like, oh, you're trying to do this, and let me do this better, right? So that's the good news, right? Now, on the other hand, right, AI doesn't do miracles, and the problem with a lot of that crap is that it's doing, like in science, they used to have this notion of the dusty deck Fortran.
Yeah.
Which is a little, it's a pile of Fortran punch cards that no one dares touch because it does what you need, right? But every time you try to mess with it, something goes wrong, right? And the unfortunate thing is like the whole SaaS world is full of this stuff that's like, you're a bank, like you can afford to screw or whatever, right? Or take any number of things.
Using Fortran.
Yeah. But the thing is that like the AI doesn't do miracles, and a lot of that stuff, it's fragile, right? But in a way, the fragility is part of their moat. Because the AI, let me put it this way, there are things that no amount of AI will figure out because you need an external reality.
Yeah.
Right? I think the way a lot of this will happen is like, I'm a company that uses Force and SAP and whatever, and I start using my AI system in parallel with the current one.
Yeah.
Right. And I do this for maybe years.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, which will not be right away, I'm like, okay, finally, like the AI always does either the same thing or better. I can get rid of this crap.
Mm-hmm.
But there might be, again, like knowing how the world works, there will probably be areas where that never happens.
Yeah, or even just building the framework to do that A/B testing over time could be really powerful. You know, just,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of, if I had to like make a bet on and of course,
that's a business.
there's people making that bet, right? Like what, and there's various versions of this, and you could debate them. And again, this is all still very much in the beginning, but I would say if somebody came to me and said, like, I want to do the next $1 trillion AI company, what should I do, right? Probably my first suggestion would be do the company that puts, there's the current AI layer that can talk in natural language and blah, 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 right? But it's also very unreliable, opaque, prone to hallucinations, blah, 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 right? There's that. And there is, in another completely different world up until now, all the corporate systems of record and all of that stuff that has all this crap, but also you can't live without.
Yeah.
And also, that stuff isn't going, this is what the SAP Salesforce guys say, like, oh, we're not going away because that stuff's not going away.
Yeah.
And they write, like, they want a database that has the ground truth, right? Another problem is that, like, now the way the agents and blah, blah call this, it's a tool call, which means it's prone to all the fact that it's an AI doing the tool call doesn't do any miracles. In fact, the AI at this point for that purpose is stupider than the SQL, Maven, right? So you need a layer that's going to do that for you.
Yeah.
And that layer is going to learn from watching the people use it.
Yeah.
Right? There's a whole sociological aspect to this, but again, one of my pieces of advice we don't know exactly how AI is going to turn up, but one thing is sure, you should be collecting data about how protocol analysis, where people talk about what they're doing. Like you should be paying your employees richly to do protocol thinking aloud continuously.
How do you keep from? How do you keep from getting conscripted into one of these major AI projects?
That's exactly. So that's another big question that's playing out right now in multiple ways, including the open source and whatnot. And of course, the OpenAIs and Anthropics and the Googles and Microsofts, they would love, right, because this stuff like this has happened in all the previous technology, to wind up, and this is what they're dreaming of, like, I will be the owner of AI, and everyone will be beholden to me, and I will be worth $1 quintillion. Like the Anthropic guys actually say this with a straight face, and if you follow that chain, it's like, well, the economy is going to become, it's not going to be the size it is now. Like with AI, it's going to grow faster,
right?
And we're going to capture 20% of it. So like $1 trillion for Anthropic is cheap.
Yep, that's
probably worth $2 quadrillion, right? But this is not the world you want to be in, right? And I think all of us need to fight that. Like what you actually want. The opposite of what they want is like, you want that layer to be commoditized.
Yeah.
Just like the operating system, like as commoditized as possible. It's just a platform, right?
There's on one hand, in some sense, it is the most commoditized and most democratized technology of all time, because in order for them to get that scale of revenue, they need as many customers as possible. That's why they got to sell it to everybody. They can't just keep it to themselves. And so even though you might end up with a sole source or a few handful of providers at the bleeding edge of what's possible in AI, for them to make the revenue they want, they have to basically have the biggest customer base of all time.
I partly agree with that. So there's another very important aspect here, which is, and again, the time. I don't think, with a couple of caveats that we can get to, I doubt that we're going to wind up in a world where there's a few big providers.
Yeah.
And the reason is very simple. Those providers, to their credit, spent a lot of money and a lot of human effort coming up with these absolutely monstrous models.
Yeah.
But 10 years from now, they're not going to seem monstrous. We will assign them to our students as a class project. Yeah. Build an LLM, build GPT-3, and then build whatever, right?
Yeah, kids are doing it on Arduinos on YouTube now.
It has like this 200-line GPT-3, right?
Yeah.
Which is great, right? It kind of really demystifies the whole thing, right?
Totally.
So their big advantage from being, and also the other aspect is, and there's this whole thing about like, oh, we're running over here, blah, blah, blah. What this mining the web is doing is giving the systems a base level of common sense knowledge, and a few other things, but mainly that, which then allows them to understand language, right? But you only need so much of that.
Right.
And again, there's a fundamental machine learning problem is that our algorithms don't generalize well enough yet. But like you only need to acquire the capability of a regular human being once. And after that, this is the beauty of computers. You can copy it 1,000,000 times.
Yeah.
So that part right now is very valuable, but it's going to come very quickly, I think, very unimportant.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. Like if you got to the point where you understand language in a language model, then, you know, dumping in more fan fiction or something doesn't make it better at language.
Right.
And that's kind of it seems, at least for a lot of things, that's kind of the stage they're at. With language, we're certainly there. And coding, we're probably getting there. And I don't know, what areas we're not getting there, but probably mostly the things where there's not good data sets, or the data sets are proprietary or something. And so they can't learn. But do you think there's I guess one thing you would have really unique insights on is from my position, where I look at what I see, I have a somewhat unique position in this because people pitch me on all their new AI breakthroughs. And nobody's publishing any of this stuff anymore because they learned from the Transformer paper that you shouldn't just give it away. So I see a lot of these behind the scenes breakthroughs, and I'm really, my view is heavily affected by that, and you probably see some of that. But what I see in the big labs is almost no breakthroughs. They have tried to lock up all the talent. All these people we're calling them researchers, but largely I think they're just engineers building, different kinds of test models to see if they can get a little bit of an edge. They've had little engineering advancements that are like a mixture of experts or something as examples of ways to like make the models cheaper and to run for inference. And then but none of them seem to be able to hold on to any of these advantages for more than like a couple of weeks before everybody else has the same thing. And so it's a very neck and neck kind of race. And it's not clear to me that we're really getting much value out of these geniuses at this stage. I mean, what do you see happening there?
Yeah, that is a great question, with several aspects to it. But to just begin with an obvious one, it is so. I agree with your description of what's going on, right? And it's perverse, right? In a way, there is now vastly more AI research than there ever was, and more resource being put in with justification, right? Because the payoff and the benefits are potentially enormous. But perversely, at the same time, there is really less progress in AI than ever, except along certain very narrow directions that everybody's going in, right? Like what happened at Google, I think, is a very interesting. Every company is a different case, but Google is a particularly interesting one because they've actually spanned a certain part of this. Google has the deepest and widest research base of anybody, right?